what we're going to do in this session is I've got some things that I'm going to say. We'll see how much of it I do say. And then I'm going to let Mark say some things that he wants to say. But at the end, we're going to try and reserve a bunch of time where we can just talk a little bit. We want to make your opportunity to ask questions and to talk back and forth with us as less threatening as possible. So I'm actually going to put right now, oh, look at that. I had another slide up.
That's a beautiful slide, too.
So many slides.
There's, such great content right there.
Oh, man. Okay.
For those of you with a photographic memory, you pretty much know everything we're going to talk about.
You don't need a photographic memory because I have handouts, too. Matthew, do you mind? Leslie, will you? Thank you. Oh, you're so comfortable, though. Let me give it to Sam. You look so warm. All right. Okay. So what I have up there is my phone number. So while we're talking, or even right now, if there's a question you want us to talk about, just text it to me, and we'll try and get to as many as we can at the end. So I don't think I'm going to give like a review of what we've just done. I think you've just heard it. So what I'm going to do is, to me, the two big things that we're working on right now is how do we move towards belonging and how do we move towards mutual dependence. So this is the time where we're going to get practical. One thing that we could do is we could, in loneliness research, people have identified 3 separate spheres where you could be lonely. Okay, so you could do like a personal inventory of loneliness right now if you wanted. There is this ring, this sort of inner ring, which is like 0 to 5, well, I guess not 0, 1 to 5 people. And this is your intimate sphere. So in this intimate sphere, basically what you get is support. Typically, if you're married, this is your spouse.
Recording in progress.
Okay. That is really weird. It just restarted. I have a connection group member who has COVID, and I'm trying to cast it for her. And I don't know when it failed last time, but it failed. So we'll see how it goes. But what was I saying? Oh, yeah. Typically, if you're married, this is your spouse. But it also, I would recommend if you're married that it's not only your spouse. I'd recommend it also be the same gendered friendship in some way. So if you don't have that, that would be an important thing to establish. Invite 2 or 3 guys over, or invite 2 or 3 girls over. Pick a time, make it regular. Work towards the sort of vulnerability where you can tell them everything and that they'll be there for you. These are the people who, like, you could call them at 2 in the morning and they'd be like, "Yep, I'm on my way," right? So do I have support? How healthy are these relationships? What role should I be playing for my close friends? Have I told them that I would do that for them? How do I move towards health? So that's your intimate support. Second would be social relationships. These would be 10 to 25 people maybe. And this is the area of mutual dependence. So these are the people that you live with, okay? Ideally speaking, these are, the reason Mark's here is because Mark is our director of groups. If you haven't met him, Mark Duvik, he's got the best hair on staff. So our groups are really oriented towards this middle level. The idea there is that you're involved. Oh, hey, okay, it's working. You're involved in each other's lives and you have ongoing time with each other. So the questions here are, do I have these social relationships? How often are we connected? Are we in good rhythms? Like, are we doing both serving things and fun things and vulnerability and studying the Bible together? Like, do we have these sort of rhythms? And what role should I be playing then in these social relationships? What responsibilities should I be taking up, and how do I move towards health? And then the third layer, sort of outer ring, is our collective, our shared sense of purpose. And so this is like, think like Cornerstone Church offers this. It's a shared sense of purpose. It's 100 plus. And so do I have a collective sense of belonging? Am I excited about the community and the mission of the community? And then again, what role should I be playing with regard to this? And how do I move towards health? So that's maybe just an inventory. But most of what we're going to talk about is this middle layer from here on out. So I'm going to talk a little, I'm going to share a couple things, and then I'm going to get to Mark's. But I'm having some serious difficulties here. Sorry. I wish I had a way to. Oh, you know what? I had it muted, so she wasn't hearing anything. She was logging back on, off and on. So appreciate your patience. Hopefully that's the last time I look over there. And sorry, Carly. Anyway, we have a very imperfect family. We've not always made good decisions about how to pursue this, and so as I'm talking to you, I'm talking to myself this whole time. But I'm just going to tell you about a few mistakes that I've made and explain those, maybe that we are currently making, and then I'm also going to talk about some things that we do at these levels: support, belonging, and shared purpose. First mistake is I've pursued status far too often. Just one example would be like how I would approach going to professional conferences, right? You go to a professional conference, you want to connect with people, and who do you want to connect with? You want to connect with people who can get you ahead in your career. Why do I need to get ahead in my career? I have a job. Like, I get to do this. This is such a privilege to invest in people and to talk about the Bible with people. I don't need more connections. So like, this is something that's changing in me. It's like, I'm going to a professional conference actually next week, and what have I done? I'm reaching out to people that I like and that are life-giving and we can mutually serve each other. I'm not reaching up. Like, I've not established meetings where I'm just trying to get connected and grow bigger. Like, growing bigger, that's the status game. Number two, I've been too connected to social media. So there's a couple things that I've done, but I still need to do more on this. One problem that I need to address still is just the addiction to positive feedback from social media. Like that's a problem, and it's something that's deeply wired in me, and it's something that I'm fighting. But things that I've done is that I don't read people's social updates. So like, I don't scroll, I don't doom scroll, I don't, like, that one's easier because it produces a lot of anger or fear or, I don't know, depression, sadness in me. And so I'll share like articles and stuff. But also I leave my phone somewhere else wherever possible. So when I get home, I set my phone on the charger and walk away from it. I unfollow everybody who lives not near me. So if you're Facebook friends with me and you live in my city, I might see, probably not, but might see what you're doing. But everybody else is unfollowed. The third mistake I've made is I feel like I've been in perpetual danger of being disappointed by everyone. So this is very awkward, right? These last two sessions, I've been talking the whole time about the responsibilities you have to other people, right? It's really, really easy in your own mind to flip that and say, the responsibilities that everybody else has towards me, especially if you're really struggling. Does that make sense? And the fact of the matter is, if you read Romans 12:6, associate with the lowly, and think, I'm a lowly person, they're not associating with me, you're going to get bitter. Like, you cannot put this lens on. The better course is to say, look, yes, I'm a lowly person, but I still have the power by the Spirit who lives in me to bless others. So this is what for the last, couple months, my determination when I wake up in the morning is that I want to be a blessing. I'm resting in the blessing that I have in Christ, and I want to be a blessing. So if I come into a room, like the dinner last night, if I come into a room, I'm not looking for people who are important, who can give me status. What I'm trying to do is I'm trying to look for someone I can encourage or someone that I can bless. And that, I think, is an important shift. Move toward people who are not playing the status game. This is something even with our friendships too. There are people who, if you have status, will come and try and draw near to you. And I have like a natural resistance to this, where I don't let those people inside my inner ring. And for me, the measure is, how do you talk to my wife? Like, I'm more status rich than my wife is. And if people approach us in friendship and don't talk to her, that's the barrier. They can't come into the inner ring. I've just given my secrets. And then number 4, I've not done a good job of cultivating close friendships. I have not done a good job with same-gendered friendships who really know me well. The exception to that has been Alex Tuckness, who's been a huge support for me. I've talked too long. I think I'm going to just give it there. So, so this is Mark Duvik. Let's all welcome him. What we're going to talk about now is we want to talk about this middle layer, like I was just saying, about this belonging and how we cultivate belonging. So the first thing is, so tell us a little bit about yourself. What do you do on a daily basis at Cornerstone?
That's a great question.
Actually, sometimes I do wonder about that. You're just kind of walking around, joking around with youth staff.
No, yeah, so I do a lot of little things. I was actually reflecting on this. I used to do just high school stuff, and then over time, like more and more things got added to my plate. So I still kind of feel like just the high school guy. And then I realized it's like, I actually don't think people see me as the high school guy anymore, just from the way that people have talked to me. So I oversee our kids ministry, our high school and middle school ministry, all of our groups, and then I do a bunch of other random stuff here and there. So I'm kind of doing a whole bunch of stuff on a day-to-day basis, which is great because I get distracted easily, so I get to float around and do a bunch of little things. So it's great. And there's a ton of people. When I say I oversee, like a ton of people are actually working and doing all the really, really boots on the ground, important stuff. I'm just overseeing, doing very little.
But groups, talk about groups.
Groups.
What are you doing with groups?
Yes, so we have, at Cornerstone, we have a number of groups. Probably the groups that you guys have heard most about are connection groups. And those are our primary vehicle for helping a big church feel like a small family. So we have those types of groups all across age ranges. So if you're in middle school, we have like middle school, and they may not be called connection groups. We just call them small groups in middle school and high school, but they function like a connection group. In Salt Company, we have groups that are connection groups. And then on the community side, we have a bunch of connection groups as well. Small groups of people, usually somewhere between 10 and 20, who get together weekly, and there's usually a little bit of group identity, but for the most part, it's just people living in community with one another, helping out live some of the one another's of Scripture, and really trying to provide a context for that middle layer of belonging. But it also provides a context where you can even find some of the kind of intimate support as well, if kind of things align right. But that's the main vehicle for groups. We also have kind of more specific groups. We have men's and women's groups, where you can get some of those same gendered relationships started. Those are usually functioning around like some sort of like book study, accountability type thing. And then we also have what's called Celebrate Recovery, or we would call like recovery groups. And those are really, really awesome. We started doing that just a few years ago. And that has just been a fantastic place for people who just have some specific wounds or hurts or hangups that they're trying to grow in and share about. And so people are able to enter into that. And it's kind of like what you talked about at the end of last session. When you are real with the people in your group, it grows the bonds of friendship and family really strongly and quickly, which is great.
Yeah, and that was the focus of the last session was how sort of widely are we bonded and how tight are those bonds, right? And so one thing that I want to do is get more concrete about like what does it look like to have those tight bonds. So tell us about the best group that you've been a part of and why.
Yes, the best group is actually my current connection group. We have been a group for quite a while. But there's really kind of 3 reasons why we feel like it's been the best group that I've been a part of, and I think many people in the group would say something similar. The first was we're kind of a little bit of rebels in the past, when our group first formed, kind of the predominant focus was more sermon discussion based groups, which in the past I think was really good, and I can explain later why we've kind of shifted the vision of groups. But we were kind of feeling like, man, I don't feel like we really need sermon discussion for our health, and we don't get the sense that the people in our group actually really need this too. So we shifted from being primarily focused on discussion to being primarily focused on family. And so we began to just see our group as, okay, well, if we're a group, what would families do? So we're like, well, I kind of want to know my family. So let's spend a lot of time just talking about our lives and getting to know the people in our group, not just in a shallow, like, hey, how was your week? But tell me your story. What are some of the really difficult things going on in your life right now? How can I pray for you? What can we do to spend time together and really get to know each other? We even did some weird things. We were like, hey, we're gonna sing together. This is gonna be a little bit awkward. We happen to have like some musical people in our group, so it wasn't the most awkward thing in the world. But we worshiped together. We prayed together. We would do a really weird thing where if someone was having a specifically difficult time, we would actually like put them in the center and like pray for them for an extended period of time. And sometimes we would even like lay hands on them and like touch their shoulder while we're praying for them. It's like just really weird, awkward, crazy stuff like that. So we just tried to be like, hey, let's just try to be a family. We would do things like Christmas parties. We did a Friendsgiving. Like we just had fun together as well. So we shifted from being more discussion focused to being more family focused. One of the second things that we really tried to create in our group was a sense of mutual commitment and ownership. And this took a little while to get because I think we're used to kind of the like leader member mentality where and if you've led a group in the past, maybe you've seen this, or if you've been in a group, you've maybe seen this, where the leader will ask a question in a discussion, conversation or something, and the leader's kind of looking around for who's gonna answer, and then the person answers, and they're just looking at the leader, and you're like, there's other people in this circle, like you can actually just talk to everyone, and then like, after they answered, you're like, does anyone want to like respond? And so sometimes it was like a two-way conversation with people listening. And so we tried to get this sense of like, hey, this is a big old group discussion. As a leader, I'm more of a facilitator. Like I may like throw out some questions, but if you have a question, you can ask that too. So one of the other things we did with that like kind of mutual ownership, we really just tried to get our people to even create the type of group that they wanted to have. So I remember the first time we created like a little group chat and wanted to create some conversation outside of a normal Tuesday night group. But we were so excited because someone said, hey, this was like the first time after like almost 2 years of this new group. And someone said, hey, I was gonna go do this fun thing. Does anyone wanna come with me? And I remember that moment because I was like, I'm busy, and so are our co-leaders, so none of us can do it. And we just like watched eagerly. I was like, who's gonna say yes? Someone say yes, please, someone say yes. And then someone was like, I'm available, I would love to do that. And we're like, yes! The leaders didn't have to do it. Like it was a part of the group. We all owned that. And that really felt kind of like a tipping point for our group where more and more that began to be the culture in our group, and it was fantastic. And it has continued on. So second thing was mutual commitment and ownership. And the third thing is just longevity. One of the things I think has made our group really fantastic is we've been with this group for like 5+ years, which when we talk about a sermon discussion-based group or like a Bible study, I don't know, for those who've been at Cornerstone long enough, there was a season where our groups were focused more on sermon discussion, and we would like multiply was the word every year or two. And so like, oh, if your group is 16 people, that's 2 groups of 8, and then more people can jump in, and so we can be really hospitable, which is really, really good, especially if the whole point of the group is just Bible study or sermon discussion, because you're not really getting deep into each other's lives. You're like a study group, and you can be a study group, and that can transition every year or two, and that's not a big deal. But as we have kind of maybe drifted into being less and less, not capable, but less and less focused on family and actually building these communities. There's a reason why we're talking about mental health and communities, because we're not as good as it as maybe we used to be, especially prior to technology and social media. We feel like the need right now is actually just to help people find a sense of belonging, find friends. That seems to be the deficit that we're dealing with. And so we wanted to shift the focus of our groups, not just our group, but as a whole, to be like, hey, let's try to create that context for family. So those would be the three things I would say contributed to why our group has been great.
Yeah, there's a lot of carryover in terms of my experience in good groups. I mean, one thing I was thinking as you were talking was this: what is the power of the family metaphor? So we've talked about the body metaphor and what that means for us in terms of how we see ourselves, but the family metaphor seems actually quite a bit more practical. Like maybe we're a body of families. Maybe that's what we need to start saying. Because we had a similar thing where it was like this moment that all of a sudden our group became something different. And for us, it was like I was in the middle of my comprehensive exams for PhD, and we had a fall a little bit like this fall where, like, you know, it gets to be October and then it's just raining the whole month. And so when it's raining the whole month, I'm not raking leaves, and then they're wet, and then, you know, I have to study. And so I was starting to get stressed out because we were like past the leaf drop-off time. We're well into November, and all these leaves are in my yard. And so I just said, hey guys, I know this is kind of stupid, but I really need my leaves picked up. Can anybody help me? I'm gonna just do it on Friday. And they showed up, and this guy, it's weird that I'm getting so emotional about this, but it was like, it was a significant moment. This guy in our connection group has like these 2 steel backpack. I mean, he was the sort of guy who just bought all the stuff, right? He's got these 2 steel backpack blowers, and he basically had all the leaves blown together in like 10 minutes on a tarp, picked the whole thing up, stuck it in his truck, and it's like, okay, so what next? I mean, it would have taken me like the whole day. You know, so we had some beef stew, but it sort of started, it was sort of the first trickle that started the way that our family worked. But, you know, we had, again, generational diversity, and everybody called Linda and Don Grandma Linda and Grandpa Don, you know. And it was just, we celebrated all the holidays together. If people weren't elsewhere committed, or even if they were, we'd do it early. We did all the things a normal family would do. It was just, that was our family, so. Yeah,
I may just jump around some of the questions, but that just reminds me of, you know, when you think of a family, when you think about this like mutual dependence, you've talked about that a little bit. When you have a family, everyone in that family, whether they're a child or the adult or the uncle, they all have something that they can give to that family. So you have the person who's like, oh yeah, I can get these leaves taken care of in 10 minutes. We've got a guy in our group as well who we went around and we said like, hey, what are your love languages? And his answer was like, my love language is like you asking me to help you with like projects. I was like, that's incredible, because we will totally have you. And he's chopped down trees for people in our group. He's mowed my lawn one time. I was like, oh, man, this is awesome. But you have that, you get to utilize the gifts of the group, and it really, really builds everyone up. But it also is building up the person who's getting to use their gifts to benefit other people. So it's this really, really beautiful relationship that you have. And one of the things, you know, when we talk about mutual ownership and commitment and being able to use gifts, things like that, there was like a 2-year season where I was in like a pretty bad season of depression. And it was also, that puts a burden on my wife. It puts a burden on the whole group. Our co-leaders were also really struggling. They were going through a pretty tough situation with foster care. And as leaders, we just felt like, oh, we don't have much in us at all. And it lasted for quite a while. And what was really, really awesome was, while it would have been very easy for us to feel like just failures, we saw our group for like 2 years just kind of carry us. And maybe you've been in that situation where you are a son or a daughter, but then your parents go through a struggle, and all of a sudden you as a kid get to like, actually let me carry you for a while. And that's when you really see family come together in a sweet way where, man, I'm gonna contribute when I have much, but I also need to recognize that sometimes I don't have much in me, or there are areas in which I am weak, and I need to be reminded of that and let the strengths of the group actually kind of carry me for a while. And that was a pretty beautiful season to feel super weak, but our family didn't suffer because other people in the family were able to step up, fill in the gaps, and continue to help everyone flourish. And it was a blessing for them because they got to use their gifts. It was a blessing for us because we got carried through a rough season, and so it was pretty awesome.
Thanks for sharing that. We got about 5 minutes left before we want to do some Q&A.
Yes.
So talk us through your 5 practices for good group culture. So you have on your handout, I realized, so I put together 10 rules for community for theology program last year, but I realized I actually also put together 5 practices. I'm not going to go over mine. Mark can go over his, but you have them all. Mark's, mine, and then my 10 rules. So.
And maybe some of that stuff will come out in Q&A as well.
Sure. But talk us through what these are and why they're important.
Yes. So when we started thinking through our group, these are some of the things that we've seen, and now that part of my job is to think through all groups, these are things that we try to implement.
Hold on just a second. Jackie, can you switch over to the Apple TV again? I'm just, oh, hold on.
That's a beautiful screen.
I'm trying to put your rules on the screen.
Oh, great.
Here.
Yeah. Well, you do that. I'll keep talking.
Okay.
So these are things that really help just create and cultivate that family feel inside of a group. It's really easy to just have a group that's focused on sermon-based discussion if that's all you're doing. If you really want your group to feel like a family, these are some things that I've found to be very helpful in my group and in others. The first thing is just to share the difficult things in your life, and then to listen really well to the difficult things going on in other people's lives. And listening well, not with the expectation that you're just going to try to fix the things going on in your life, but really just sympathizing with them, empathizing with them, and kind of sitting with them in the pain and in the difficulty. Because there's some really complex, difficult things that we walk through, and there actually aren't simple solutions. And so it's really helpful, especially where this is through the lens of mental health. They probably need someone to help them think through, how to walk through some difficult circumstances, but they also do need people who are just gonna sit with them, cry with them, and say, I'm so sorry. Do you want to chat and grab a beer and just hang out? Or like, do you want me to just distract you and we can just hang out and have fun, even though, like, not ignoring the difficult thing going in your life, but you just need a friend right now. And people who are going through difficult things need all that.
Let me throw a quick word on that. We have at Cornerstone a care pyramid, and basically we have connection groups at the bottom layer. Connection group is the first line of defense when people are going through something difficult. And you go up the pyramid as you need to bring in more resources. So you might have sort of pastoral care, or you might need to go see a therapist. You might involve yourself in Celebrate Recovery. But the point is, you're not leaving the bottom layers behind as you go up. And so I think that's really important. Your connection groups are a spot where you are responsible for loving each other and bearing each other's burdens. But that also does not mean that you're taking another person's burdens. Like, you do not have the capacity and the resources to bear the full weight of other people's burdens. What it means is you put a hand on the burden. And that's really hard to do because it requires you to be both deeply empathetic and integrated and differentiated. Like, I am not them in a strong sense. Like, I don't have to fix all their problems, because it's just maddening when you're trying to tell someone your problems and they are trying to fix them, because it's uncomfortable, it's painful, but your job is to sit with the pain. You don't have control over it, but be there with them. That's your job, be there with them. So.
Yeah. One of the reasons why this first one is so helpful is one of the things that we've experienced personally, and we've seen this in others, is you get into a group, you really want to be family with them, but you kind of get this sense of like, well, I don't know how much I can share. And so you feel like you're kind of okay friends, but then in the back of your mind, it's like, yeah, but you don't really know. You don't really know the things that I'm dealing with. And because you don't know, I don't know if you'll stick with me if you did know. And so when we actually share those difficult things and someone then just puts the hand on and say, hey, that's really hard. What can I do? Or let's just hang out. Then you realize, wow, I actually do belong. And that's really, really critical. Second thing is to just do fun things together. And missional, these could be split up into two things, but families have fun together. We don't have to be all serious. Like, be goofy, be weird, let each other's quirks kind of come out in group. One of the guys in our group, he's just hilarious. He just is like the punniest person I've ever met. He actually is going to be a dad soon. They just found out they're having twins. And I was like, dude, you're ready for this. Like, you have so many dad jokes and you create more and more every single minute. It's just fantastic. And so it's really fun for us to just get to laugh because he's ridiculous. So do fun things, but also missional things. When you are serving together, there's something about that really bonds people. If you've been a part of a family that has like a family mission statement or things like that, even just finding service opportunities. We, as a group, would go do this, or we would contribute in some of the serving opportunities that we had at Cornerstone. Those are great. Third thing I've already touched on a little bit, longevity. If you really want to build a strong kind of family feel inside of a group, and this doesn't have to be one of our Cornerstone groups. This is just a group of people in general. You kind of have to stick together for a while. Families are rarely built in a couple of years. I would say probably never built in a couple of years. So stick together. Fourth thing is to lean into discomfort and conflict. Part of this is the leaning into like the strong, weak mentality of, there's a weak person in my group who's going through a lot. If I'm going to actually engage in that, that's going to be uncomfortable for me because right now things are fine for me. And if I enter into that weakness, that's going to touch me, and it's going to be a little bit of a challenge, but ultimately that helps to build the bonds of friendship and family. The other piece of that is conflict. If we don't address conflict, and this is coming from someone who is terrified of conflict, God has been helping me get better in the past, specifically 3 months, and it's awful, but very, very awesome at the same time. And when we don't engage in conflict, specifically interpersonal conflict, what ends up happening is like a little bit of acid gets kind of poured into the relationship, and slowly or quickly, things just start to dissolve and fester, and there's mistrust and everything with that person is in the room, and it's like, everything changes because you can't talk about the thing that you need to talk about in order to bring the relationship back to a place of health and closeness. So while that might be really difficult, it's super important. And if you need, if you're in a situation and there's a mediator, whether it's a mutual friend or if you're in a connection group and it's one of the leaders, use the tools that you have to try to resolve some of that conflict.
Two quick things to add to that. First of all, there's going to be times where you're in your groups where someone will share something and it's impossible within that 15-minute window for that person to actually succeed in communicating. Mm-hmm. The lenses of all the people who are in the circle are in such a space that it's going to take maybe months or years for them to actually understand what's going on. Like I thought about it on the way in today. Like, I don't know what it's like to be evicted. Like, it would take me a while to get my head around all the shame and layers of shame that would be part of that, right? So the reason that I'm bringing that up, though, is it's one thing to communicate something and to not be entirely understood. It's another thing to do that and then have it just dropped. So if you're a group and someone's communicating something that you can't understand, that's your cue to begin the process of understanding. So don't just say, whoa, well, thanks for sharing, and then it's gone. It's not gone. It's still there. Begin the process of understanding. The other thing is conflict. I think this is an area where actually social media has shaped us, right? What happens when you get angry on Twitter? You unfollow or block, right? That's what you do. So anger, it's like we have these associated now. Like, anger is the end of a relationship. That's how relationships end. It's anger. But we have to flip that. We have to say, no, anger is an opportunity for deepening. I had this happen with a friend of mine. I made an insensitive comment. It was actually an insensitive comment against women. I'm not going to repeat it right now, but this friend of mine, who's a very dear friend, a PhD student, just said, just very gently but firmly confronted me in the moment for it. And I was stunned, but also was like so grateful. It was like, you are exactly right. That was a horrible thing to say. And what it did was it deepened our relationship. So if we think that anger is the end of a relationship, that's going to be terrible for our social bonds. Anger is an opportunity to build the relationship. So, sorry, get to your fifth.
No, that's great.
I'm wasting time.
No, this is all good stuff. I don't think that's a waste of time. The fifth thing is this idea of what can you contribute to the group. And we've talked about this a little bit with some of the people in my group. But like I said before, everyone has a set of gifts, and we need to bring those to the group to edify the entire group. So there's things like, you may not be a great facilitator of discussion. Well, that's fine. You might be a really great host. And like, you just love making people feel welcome. And so you want to open up your home and have snacks and all. Awesome. Let's find a way for you to use that gift in whatever group you're a part of. And that's beneficial for everyone. You might be a great comforter or a great listener. And so when someone is bringing something difficult, you're the person to sit across from them, cry with them, pray with them. And it's incredibly encouraging for the other person to be there. So figure out what it is that I bring to the table in relationships, and I just need to give that as freely and generously as possible to edify the whole group. So those are the 5 things that we've seen in our group and in other groups really help to create and cultivate that sense of family and familial relationship inside groups.
I'm now playing games on my phone. I'm reading your questions. We've got a lot of them.
It's Crossy Road. I can see.
Yeah. It's Farmville.
Oh,
You guys remember Farmville?
It's been a while since I was in high school ministry,
Yeah.
so I don't know the games
Anyway,
anymore.
we have more questions we can get to than we can get to. I'm sorry in advance. But let me start with a easy sort of softball, because it was already on my list. But how do people get connected to groups?
Fantastic, yes. So we have tried to make this as like simple and clear as possible. You can go straight to the link of cornerstonelife.com/groups, intuitively enough, and we actually have a list of the groups. So all the groups I talked about, whether it's middle school, high school, whatever, connection groups, men's groups, women's groups, all of that stuff is on there. There's a little blurb about what those groups are. Specifically with connection groups, when you sign up to jump into a connection group, our team actually tries to get to know you a little bit and find a group that would be a good fit for you, so that, again, we have the most likely chance that you guys would connect well, become a family.
Follow-up question. If someone's in a group and it's not really functioning like a family, And maybe the reason is because people just don't need that from the group. What they want is a sermon discussion group. If you're leading that group, is it your responsibility to convince them to be all in and to make this family? How would you manage that group?
Yeah, I think so. So is this coming from the perspective of
connection group leader? Yeah.
A leader saying, "Hey, my group doesn't really feel like a family. I want
Yes.
it to, though."
Yes. Right.
So I just want to give you encouragement. It took me and my wife, and then I think either halfway through or like a year and a half in, we actually got co-leaders to help us with this as well. But it took us like 2 years to get to the place where it's like, we did it. We actually feel like a family. And I think partly that's because of just the previous culture that we're coming out of. We were coming out of a more sermon discussion-based type of group. And so people are used to that. They're familiar with that. And so it can take a little bit of a transition. I even just talked with a connection group leader just the other day who someone jumped into their group and was just expecting a Bible study. There's nothing wrong with Bible studies, but this leader just had a conversation with them and said, "Hey, this group doesn't really function like a Bible study. Here's the idea, here's the goal." And now he's like loving the group. And because he just had his expectations changed. And so I would say if you're a leader or if you're going to be a leader and you find yourself struggling, if there's specific people who are struggling to really feel like this group is a family or they're not kind of acting the way they should in a family, I would go to the point of conflict. You might just want to like get lunch with them and say, "Hey, how do you think group is going? What do you expect our group should be?" And maybe just kind of shape their expectations a little bit and see if that's really helpful. The other piece I would say to that is everyone should be in a group. It doesn't necessarily need to be one of our groups, though. You might actually have an informal group where you're like, we are family. It's not a connection group, though. It's not a men's group. It's not a women's. It's just a group of friends that have, over the years, done all of these things intuitively, and we've become a family. So there might be some people who really want a Bible study, and they join a connection group thinking that it's a Bible study. It's like, well, I don't really need a family. I already have that, and they're integrated into the church or whatever. And so then you can just say like, "Hey, that's fine. You don't have to be here." Like if you're looking for a Bible study and this isn't the Bible study, that's actually okay. You could start your own Bible study if that's what you want. And I think they're free to not necessarily need to be in the group just because it's a Cornerstone group.
I'm trying to remember how you said it to me the first time we talked. It was like, not everyone in a connection group has community.
Oh, yes.
And not everyone who has community is in a connection group.
Yeah.
Is that right?
Yeah, that's true. Right. Yeah, because community is a little bit more, it can be intangible at times. And we might want to think that's like, oh, I'm just in a group, and therefore that group automatically is my community. But it doesn't always work like that. And so you can be in a connection group and feel lonely. Even though you have that group, especially if that group isn't actually doing some of these things, it's like, well, you're not actually my family. And you can actually have that family. You can have that sphere of belonging and actually not officially be a part of a group. So that's just something to kind of look for. And I don't know.
I was going to say, as an analogy, when we moved into our other house in Kenosha, the owners prior to us didn't take great care of the house. But the owner prior to that was an amazing gardener, apparently, because we had all this stuff that was growing up. The flower beds were totally overgrown with weeds, but then there'd be like green onions in there, or stuff like that. And like, it's possible for me to plant a green onion and not get one. Like something could happen. But it's also possible for a green onion to just grow up, and I didn't, use that level of intentionality. So that's my analogy. But the reason that I'm thinking about growth is, what you're doing essentially is you're trying to cultivate community. Our groups are pathways for doing that. It's a pathway. There's practices. that we recommend for doing that, but what you're trying to do is you're trying to grow the green onion. And the fact of the matter is it's going to take time. That's what you're saying about longevity. So your group may be a miserable failure for 3 years, and all of a sudden the 4th year it's like, hey, we trust each other now, you know? And so I think that we just need to, you know, the important thing is that you belong in a family within this body. I like this language, I'm just start saying that. How it happens is a little bit sketchier.
Yep. Yeah, and that's the whole point of our groups is we want to provide the best opportunity for that community to grow. And Alex had a similar illustration last night of the gardener and the plants and things like that. So,
last question, because then we got to go. Because we got the session's coming in here, so we just need to make room for people. But how does a connection group relate to other forms of community, like within the Ames community, or what if your community includes non-believers in it? I'm in a book club with 3 guys that I know that are my neighbors that aren't professing evangelical Christians. And so, you know, how do you bring those things together?
Yeah, okay. Say the first part of the question one more time. I got the second part.
Yeah, how does the community that we have here at Cornerstone relate to the community that we form outside in the community?
Yeah. So again, if we're going to use this illustration of a family, you may have siblings or parents or cousins who think very, very differently from you, who aren't believers, but they still might be great friends. I think when we think of the great commandment of love your neighbor as yourself, it's probably really important for us to create friendships with people who aren't believers. We need to love them, and not just love them for the purpose of like, oh, I'm just going to hang out with you until I can share the gospel with you. And then if you don't want to become a believer, then I'm moving on to someone else. Like, I don't know if that's what Jesus really meant when he said, love your neighbor as yourself. And so we need to get a little bit better at just being great friends to people who are in the same circles as us, whether it's the church circle or the work circle or the neighborhood circle. And again, if your brother or sister loves Jesus and is orienting their entire life around Jesus, but they also love you and welcome you into their life, that neighbor or that coworker, they're gonna see that and be like, man, there's something different about you. And then if they see the struggles that you have when you're open and vulnerable with them, and they're like, dude, you're going through so much. How in the world are you not falling apart? Then we have the opportunity to give a reason for the hope that we have and say, well, there's a lot of things going on in my life that are difficult, but I have Jesus, and that keeps me solid. That's going to stick with them, but it's only going to stick with them if you actually have real relationship. If they just know you from a distance or kind of are an acquaintance with you, they might be a little bit curious, and by God's grace, they would be curious enough to ask, but it'll be better when it's deep friendship.
I think there's multiple places in the New Testament where I think it's Paul and maybe the author of Hebrews also talk about the responsibility that we have to everyone and then the special responsibility we have to the body of Christ. So we're related in a bodily way, in a special way within the body of Christ. But there's also just this tremendous missional opportunity to not just tell of the love of Jesus, but to exhibit the love of Jesus in how we build community with unbelievers. And I think, I'm trying to find my train of thought here again. Oh, yeah, I remember what I was going to say. It's really important to remember that all love is Christian love. Like, why did creation happen? It's because God existed in a loving triune fellowship and he wanted to share that, right? So love is not some sort of secular neutral term. Love is who God is. And so what are you going to do? How are you going to share God's love with your neighbor? By loving your neighbor and by being in relationship, even if it's painful, but maybe because it's painful, right? You guys are going to disagree on a lot of different things. And you're going to have those conversations. You're going to be honest. You're going to have that conflict. But you're going to say, in the midst of that conflict, I'm digging in. I'm going further. And I think that is part of our missional responsibility is to show the gospel by how we engage with others. Our family has like 3 different spheres in which we're deeply connected with people who don't share our Christian faith. So I think it's really important. All right, well, thank you so much for coming. I'm sorry that I couldn't get to more of your questions, but my email, if you want to write it down right now, is mlapine, L-A-P-I-N-E, @cornerstonelife.com. So if you have some questions, I know there were some people asking about different research that they could get access to, or even questions about abuse in community. I think that's a really important question. But feel free to email me. I'd love to engage with you or even have coffee with you to talk a little bit more about this stuff. But let me close this in prayer, and then we'll allow other people to come in. Father, we are so grateful that we have been included into the fellowship of your triune life. God, you pray that we would be one as you are one, and I pray that that would be true of this body. In the name of Jesus Christ, amen.